No cameras, no headlines, no farewell tour. Just one quiet moment, one unexpected encounter, and a message that would only be understood after it was too late. What Michael Jackson did that night would break hearts years later. And when the truth finally surfaced, it left even those closest to him in tears. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss our emotional stories about Michael Jackson. Los Angeles, 2009. The city shimmered with sunlight, but inside Michael Jackson's home, the air felt strangely still. The kind of stillness that settles when something is about to change, even if no one knows how or why. Michael sat alone near the window, the curtains half open, watching the palm trees sway. His phone rested in his hand. He hadn't made the call yet. For weeks, the world around him had been roaring with expectation. Rehearsals for this is it. Endless meetings. Interviews scheduled. Pressure building with every passing day. But beneath the noise of preparation, something else had been growing. A quiet awareness that the life he was living could not continue the same way much longer. Not because of exhaustion. Not because of fear. Because something inside him was beginning to let go. He thought of his children asleep in the next room. He thought of his mother's voice on the phone the night before, gentle, comforting, full of love. He thought of the fans who waited outside the gates every day, holding signs, singing his songs, believing in him more than he sometimes believed in himself. And he thought of the word he had been avoiding, goodbye. Michael stood and walked slowly through the house. The walls were lined with photographs from every era of his life. The boy in the Jackson 5, the young man discovering his own voice, the icon of the 80s, the quieter, more fragile figure of the last decade. Each image felt like a different lifetime. In the kitchen, he poured himself a glass of water but didn't drink it. His hands trembled slightly. That morning, he had received a letter from an old friend, not a celebrity, not a producer. Someone from long before the world had swallowed him whole. The letter was simple. I just wanted you to know that you mattered to me. Michael had read it 3 times. He carried the letter now in his pocket, folded carefully. Outside, a car door slammed. Voices echoed briefly from the street. Life continued. Michael returned to the living room and finally made the call. "Hi," he said softly when the voice answered. "It's me." There was a pause. Then the woman on the other end inhaled sharply. "Michael?" "Yes." They hadn't spoken in years. Time had carried them in different directions. But the warmth in her voice returned instantly, as if no time had passed at all. They talked about nothing at first. The weather, old memories, laughing softly at things that no longer mattered. Then the conversation slowed. "I just wanted to hear your voice," Michael said. She hesitated. "Are you okay?" Michael looked at the window, the sky, the quiet street. "I don't know, but I wanted to say thank you for being there when I didn't know who I was yet." Her voice trembled. "You don't have to thank me." "Yes," he said, "I do." They stayed on the line for a long time, until words became unnecessary. When the call ended, Michael remained seated, phone still in his hand. That afternoon, he went to the rehearsal studio. The dancers were already warming up. The band was tuning their instruments. The sound of movement and music filled the space, alive and electric. Michael stepped onto the floor. "Let's begin," he said. They ran through the choreography. His body moved effortlessly, but his eyes kept drifting to the far end of the room, where the mirrors reflected everything back at him. Every motion, every expression, every year of his life. During a break, one of the dancers approached him. "You okay, Mike?" she asked. Michael smiled. "I am." But inside, he wasn't sure. When rehearsal ended, he stayed behind. The room emptied slowly until it was just him and the echo of music that no longer played. He walked to the center of the stage. For a moment, he closed his eyes. He imagined the crowd that would soon be there. The lights, the voices, the energy, the love. And he whispered, "Thank you." That evening, back at home, Michael wrote 3 short notes, one for each of his children. Not long letters, just a few words. Simple, gentle, full of love. He sealed them in envelopes and placed them in his desk. Later, as night fell, Michael stepped outside. The air was cool. The moon hung low above the trees. A fan stood quietly at the gate, holding a sign that read, "We believe in you." Michael paused. He raised his hand and waved. The fan's eyes filled with tears. Michael smiled. He did not know why his heart felt so full and so heavy at the same time. But deep inside, something had already begun to say goodbye, and the world had no idea. The next night, the rain came without warning. Los Angeles blurred into streaks of light as Michael's car moved slowly through the city. He sat in the back seat, coat draped around his shoulders, watching the streets glide past. His phone buzzed once, then again. Messages from the production team, from management, from people who needed him, wanted him, depended on him. He did not answer. Instead, he asked the driver to take a different route. "Where to?" the driver asked. "Just keep going," Michael said softly. They passed neighborhoods Michael hadn't seen in years. Old storefronts, closed theaters, small diners glowing under flickering signs. Memories pressing on him from all sides, rehearsals, recording sessions, laughter, exhaustion, childhood, loneliness. Finally, he asked the driver to stop near a quiet park. "I'll walk from here." The driver hesitated. "Sir, it's raining." Michael smiled faintly. "That's okay." He stepped out into the rain, pulling his coat tighter. The night air felt clean, almost forgiving. He walked slowly along the path that wound through the park, the sound of water dripping from the trees mixing with distant traffic. On a bench near the edge of the path, a young woman sat alone, soaked, her head in her hands. Michael slowed. He almost kept walking. But something in the way she sat, the weight in her shoulders, the stillness, reminded him too much of himself. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. She looked up, startled. The streetlight revealed her face, streaked with rain and tears. She blinked. You're Michael Jackson." Michael nodded. "Yes." She laughed softly, disbelieving. "Of course you are." He smiled. "I am." They sat on the bench, rain falling around them. Her name was Anna. She told him she had just left a job she loved, a relationship she believed in, and a life she no longer recognized. Everything had fallen apart in a single week. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now," she whispered. Michael listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer advice. He simply stayed. When she finished, she looked at him. "Why are you here?" Michael thought for a moment. "Because sometimes a heart needs quiet." They sat in silence. The rain softened. Before she left, Anna said, "Thank you. I don't think you know what this means to me." Michael touched her hand gently. "I do." She walked away into the night, unaware that she had just become part of something she would never fully understand. Michael stayed on the bench for a long time after she was gone. When he finally returned home, it was nearly dawn. Inside, he found one of his children awake, sitting on the bed. "Daddy?" the child whispered. Michael sat beside him. "I'm here." The boy wrapped his arms around his neck. "I had a bad dream." Michael held him close. "It's okay. I've got you." The house fell quiet again. And somewhere in the stillness of that night, Michael felt the fragile truth growing clearer. Every goodbye begins long, before anyone realizes it has started. Morning arrived slowly, as if the sun itself were unsure whether it should disturb the fragile stillness inside Michael's home. Michael had not slept. He sat at the kitchen table, the soft glow of the early light touching the edges of the room. In front of him lay the 3 envelopes he had written the night before, one for each of his children. He stared at them for a long time, his fingers resting on the paper as though he could feel their future through it. He finally stood and walked to the piano. The house was quiet, but the silence felt alive, almost listening. Michael placed his hands on the keys and began to play softly. No melody he recognized, just fragments of feeling, floating through the room. Each note carried something he could not explain in words. Love, regret, hope, fear, memory. When he stopped, tears had gathered in his eyes. He wiped them away and returned to the table. That was when he noticed the 4th envelope. It had not been there the night before. It was unmarked. No name, no address. Michael's breath caught. He opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper. I know you were trying to say goodbye. You don't have to do it alone. Michael felt the room spin slightly. The handwriting was unfamiliar. Calm. Certain. He read the message again. A knock came at the door. Michael froze. The knock came again, gentle but firm. He folded the letter and slid it into his pocket before walking to the door. When he opened it, a man stood on the porch, soaked from the morning rain. He looked to be in his early 40s, with tired eyes and a quiet posture. He held nothing in his hands. "I'm sorry to disturb you," the man said. "My name is Daniel. I believe you received a letter this morning." Michael's heart pounded. "You wrote it?" Daniel nodded. Michael hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in." They sat across from each other, in the living room. The rain tapped softly against the windows. "How did you know?" Michael asked. Daniel looked down. "Because I once stood where you're standing now, and someone saw me when I thought no one did." Michael studied him. "I lost my sister last year," Daniel continued. "She was your biggest fan. She told me once that your music kept her alive when nothing else could. When she died, I promised myself I would help at least one person the way she said you helped her." Michael's chest tightened. "So I started listening," Daniel said, "to people, to the things they don't say out loud." Michael remained silent. "You don't have to tell me anything," Daniel added. "I just wanted you to know, whatever you're carrying, it doesn't have to stay trapped inside you." Michael felt something inside him crack open. They talked for hours. About music, about children, about fear, about the strange pressure being needed by the world while still feeling unbearably alone. When Daniel finally stood to leave, Michael walked him to the door. "Why me?" Michael asked. Daniel smiled gently. "Because sometimes the ones who give the most are the ones who need to be seen the most." Michael watched as Daniel disappeared into the rain. The house felt different after that. Later that day, Michael returned to rehearsal. The dancers noticed a change in him immediately. "You okay, Mike?" one of them asked. Michael smiled. "I think I'm learning how to be." As the music played, Michael danced with a quiet intensity, every movement filled with something deeper than performance. That evening, he sat with his children and watched a movie. He laughed more than he had in months. When they fell asleep on the couch, he didn't move. He just held them. Before going to bed, Michael took out the 3 letters again. He added one more line to each. "No matter where life takes you, my love will always find you." He sealed them once more. Outside, the city shimmered in the dark. And Michael, for the first time in a long while, allowed himself to believe that goodbye did not have to mean the end of love. It could mean the beginning of something eternal. The next few days passed in a strange calm, as if the world had decided to hold its breath. Rehearsals continued. Meetings piled up. Schedules filled every empty space. Yet Michael moved through it all with a quiet, reflective focus. The dancers noticed it. The crew felt it. There was something softer in his voice, something steadier in his presence, as if he were slowly releasing a weight he had carried for years. One afternoon, during a break, Michael wandered outside the rehearsal studio alone. The sky was gray, low clouds hanging over the city. He pulled his jacket closer around him and walked down the sidewalk without a destination. He passed a small bookstore he had never noticed before and stopped. Inside, the air smelled of paper and dust. Rows of worn shelves stretched across the room, filled with forgotten stories. The owner, an elderly woman with kind eyes, looked up. "Take your time," she said. Michael drifted through the aisles. He pulled out a thin book of poetry and flipped through it. One line caught his attention. "Some goodbyes are whispered by the soul long, before the lips are ready to speak them." He closed the book slowly. At the counter, the woman studied him. "That one always finds the right person." Michael nodded. "It found me." That night at home, Michael stood in his children's doorway long after they had fallen asleep. He memorized their faces, the rhythm of their breathing, the quiet innocence of their dreams. He returned to his room and sat on the edge of the bed, holding the letters he had written, unsure why his chest felt so tight. The phone rang. It was Catherine. "Michael," she said softly, "I was thinking about you. I was thinking about you too, Mama." They talked about simple things, recipes, childhood memories, old songs playing on the radio. Before hanging up, she said, "You are loved. Don't forget that." "I won't," Michael whispered. The following morning, Michael received a message from Daniel. "Thank you for listening. That matters more than you know." Michael stared at the words for a long time before replying. "So, do you?" That evening, he returned to the rehearsal studio after everyone had gone. The vast space was empty, the stage dark, the mirrors reflecting only his solitary figure. He stepped into the center of the floor. He danced, not for cameras, not for crowds, not for perfection, for himself. Each movement carried memory. Each turn released something he had been holding inside for years. When the music in his head finally faded, he collapsed to the floor, breathing hard, tears sliding silently down his cheeks. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Michael lay there, staring at the ceiling. The storm was coming. He felt it, but for the first time, he was not afraid of what the storm might take. He was only afraid of what it might reveal. The morning of the meeting arrived wrapped in a strange stillness. Michael woke before the sun, his body restless, his mind heavy with thoughts that refused to settle. The house was quiet. He walked to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water, then stood by the window watching the sky change colors. The phone call had come the night before. A private meeting. Important. No details. Michael already knew it would change everything. He arrived at the office building just after 9. The room was too bright, the air too cold. His team waited, their expressions unreadable. Papers were laid out on the table. Contracts, projections, schedules, the future neatly organized. They spoke for nearly 2 hours. Numbers, expectations, promises, risks. Michael listened carefully, nodding, asking questions. But something inside him remained distant, as if he were watching the conversation from far away. When the meeting ended, everyone stood. Hands were shaken. Smiles exchanged. But Michael did not stand. "I need a moment," he said. The room slowly emptied. Michael sat alone at the table, staring at the papers. He thought of the bench in the rain, the letters on his desk, his children asleep in the next room, the woman in the bookstore, Daniel's quiet voice, Catherine's words. He folded the contract. Later that afternoon, Michael walked along the beach. The wind pulled at his jacket, the sound of the ocean steady and patient. He removed his shoes and stepped into the sand, letting the cold water wash over his feet. A man nearby strummed a guitar, the melody soft and familiar. Michael closed his eyes. When he returned home, the house was full of laughter. His children ran to him, telling him about their day, pulling him toward the living room. That night, Michael sat alone in his room, the contract on the desk in front of him. He picked up his pen, and then he stopped. He turned the page over and wrote something else entirely. Not a signature, a promise. The next morning, Michael called a meeting again. Everyone gathered, waiting. Michael stood. "I'm choosing my life," he said simply. No one spoke. "I will do the show," he continued, "but not at the cost of my soul." The room fell silent. That night, Michael stood at the window, watching the city. The world had not ended. It had only changed direction. The days that followed the meeting unfolded slowly, like the world itself had chosen a different tempo. Michael woke earlier than usual now, not from anxiety, not from pressure, but from a strange sense of clarity. Each morning, he sat by the window before the house came alive, watching the light creep over the city. For the first time in years, he felt present inside his own life. The decision he had made still echoed in his chest. "I'm choosing my life." It wasn't a rejection of music. It wasn't a rejection of the stage. It was a refusal to disappear inside expectations that were no longer his. At rehearsal, the atmosphere had shifted. The dancers noticed it immediately. He moved with purpose, not urgency. His instructions were softer, more intentional. He stopped often, not to correct, but to listen. When someone struggled, he waited. When someone laughed, he laughed too. During a break, one of the younger dancers sat beside him on the floor. "Mr. Jackson," You seem different. Michael smiled. Different is good. Is it scary? Michael considered the question. It was. But then I realized something. The only thing scarier is never changing at all. That afternoon, Michael drove alone. No security caravan. No destination. Just a road. The radio playing softly. The windows down. He passed streets he hadn't seen since he was young. Old neighborhoods. Familiar corners of a city that had watched him grow from boy to legend. He stopped near a small community center. A handwritten sign on the door read, "After-school music program." Michael hesitated, then stepped inside. Children were scattered across the room with instruments, broken guitars, dented drums, a piano missing a few keys. Their laughter filled the space. A young teacher stood at the front, trying to organize the chaos. Michael leaned quietly against the wall, unseen. One boy sat alone in the corner, humming softly, eyes closed, tapping the rhythm on his knees. Michael recognized that posture. After the session ended, Michael approached him. "That was beautiful," Michael said gently. The boy looked up confused, then stunned. "Are you?" Michael placed a finger over his lips and smiled. The boy nodded, breathless. They spoke for a few minutes. The boy told him about his mother working nights, about the noise in their apartment, about how music was the only place that felt quiet inside. Michael's throat tightened. Before leaving, Michael donated anonymously to the program, enough for new instruments, new classes, new beginnings. As he walked back to his car, something settled inside him. This was the life he had been missing. That evening, Michael sat with his children on the living room floor, building something out of pieces that didn't quite fit together. They laughed when it collapsed. "It's okay," Michael said. "We'll build it again." Later, after they were asleep, Michael returned to his room and opened the drawer where the letters waited. He reread each one slowly. The words still carried weight, but they no longer felt like an ending. They felt like a beginning. The phone buzzed. It was Daniel. "I've been thinking about you," Daniel said. "I've been thinking about me too," Michael replied softly. They spoke for a long time. About the meeting, the road, the children, the center. "You're changing," Daniel said. Michael smiled. "I think I'm finally arriving." The next week, the media pressure intensified. Questions multiplied. Rumors grew louder. Every decision Michael made seemed to echo across the world. But something remarkable happened. Michael didn't retreat. He stayed open. He answered with kindness, with patience, with presence. One evening, while walking through a quiet hallway backstage, Michael overheard two crew members whispering. "He's calmer lately. Yeah, it's like he's not carrying the world anymore." Michael paused. For years, he had been the one holding everything up. The image, the expectations, the fear of disappointing millions. Now he was finally setting it down. Later that night, Michael stood alone on the empty stage. The seats stretched endlessly in front of him, silent and dark. He whispered into space, "Thank you." Not to the crowd, to himself. When he returned home, Catherine was waiting for him. They sat together on the couch, her hand resting over his. "You seem lighter," she said. "I am." She studied his face. "What changed?" Michael thought for a moment. "I stopped running from a boy I used to be." Catherine smiled softly. "That boy is still in you." "I know," Michael said, "and I'm protecting him now." That night, Michael dreamed of himself as a child, standing on a small stage, scared and excited, heart pounding. In the dream, the older Michael stepped beside him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're safe now," he told him. When he woke, tears were on his pillow, but his heart felt steady. The next morning, Michael made another quiet decision. He began writing again. Not for an album, not for the world, for himself. Page after page filled with thoughts, memories, confessions, questions. Things he had never allowed himself to say out loud. And in the middle of one page, he wrote a single line and circled it. "Lie before you leave." He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. The promise was made. But Michael had no idea how soon that promise would be tested. or how deeply the next moment would carve itself into the hearts of everyone around him, because the quiet before the storm was almost over.